Welcome back to another episode of the Media Pass. I am your host, Alex, and as always, joined by my other host, Matt. How you doing, Matt?
Pretty good, man. Pretty good. I had a quick question for you about video, face, being in, because this is on YouTube.
Right.
Please follow us, subscribe. Last episode, man, didn't hit the same on YouTube as it should have. I'm a little bit disappointed in our listeners for that, but
come on, guys, episode. Do better.
Be better. So for me, I feel like I own like a decent amount of clothing, but when I'm in my work from home grind, I find myself wearing the same clothes every day. So on the when I know I'm doing the podcast, I have to think back to episodes and make sure I'm not wearing the same clothes multiple episodes in a row, because I just don't want viewers to be concerned. I guess for my well-being, it's man, this guy's I know you make less money in sports, but this guy's been wearing the same clothes for the last 7 episodes, Do you ever have that problem?
Not really, because I don't know. I just cycle through the same 5 things because I don't even think about it. But I mean, I understand being conscious of it. You don't want to be like a cartoon character where you're wearing the same thing every episode. That'd be really weird. When I was actually doing the face cam stuff in my actual YouTube videos, I was very conscious of it because I didn't want to wear the same exact thing every single time. But with the podcast, I'm I don't really care. It's only once a week. I happen to wear the same thing back-to-back weeks. What are you going to do? Break out a pitchfork because I wore the same hoodie in back-to-back episodes? Get over it. It's a week apart. I don't care. Maybe I should care. Now I'm going to be a lot more conscious of it. So thanks a lot for that.
It's something, man. It is a point of concern. Should I segue? Is this time to segue it?
Do we have any Q&As? I feel like we've neglected the Q&As for a while.
Well, we haven't had any questions. Let me check our YouTube, because that's usually where they come. If we have questions, guys, remember at the you guys can send us questions. Sorry about
only
that.
If you listen all the way through. You have to listen to the entire episode.
Yeah.
We'll know if you didn't.
No.
We have ways.
No, we didn't get any. I don't think we got any questions this episode. I think that
did we get any questions last episode? I just want to make sure we didn't forget anybody. I don't know why I'm asking you. It's your job to pull them up. I can do it.
I think we got one question last episode, but we made an entire video answering it. Well, we have something coming out that'll answer it.
No, I don't think we have any questions going back to at least 3 episodes ago. So ask questions, but only if you listen to the end of the episode, and if you leave a like on the video, and if you subscribe. We'll know if you didn't. I'll find you.
We'll answer any questions.
Right. About anything.
Even questions about Alex's personal life.
I'll give you my address. I'll give you my phone number, social security number, credit card number. All right, let's get into the meat and potatoes, shall we?
I'm stalling because I'm scared.
I'm a little nervous too, because I feel like we're tackling a semi-charged debate.
Well, so a couple episodes ago, we did our top 10 point guard rankings, and 2 guys we very intentionally left off. One, because they are listed as shooting guards on Basketball Reference, even though they are a team's lead guard, lead creator, or whatever. And 2, because we didn't want to add to the just anxiety of all the great players we were already talking about and then adding these 2 guys into that. But if you hadn't guessed or, hadn't developed the ability to read titles of episodes, today we are going to be doing our first ever player debate. And it'll be between Donovan Mitchell of the Cleveland Cavaliers and Devin Booker of the Utah Jazz. Now, before we really get into this, I want to just kind of lay out some stuff here. The first thing is, this is not going to be like a presidential debate. Me and Alex are not being
we're not each
here.
Picking a side.
Yeah, exactly. We are just going to talk about these 2 guys, and at the end try to come up with some sort of answer. The point is this is a tough debate, and there is no clear-cut answer here. I have an idea of who I prefer at this moment in time, but I mean, if me and Alex talk about it enough and his points are convincing, a lot of times on the show, me and him kind of convince each other of things on the fly, and that's the beauty of this podcast, is me and him along with informing you guys, are learning from each other, which I think is beautiful. But the reason we're comparing these two, I think, is obviously one, they're both shooting guards. And then two is they're both 27 years old, even though they've been in the league for a little bit of a different amount of time. They both have been in different roster constructions. We've been able to see what they look like in different team constructs, different ecosystems. We have like a good sample size. Both of them are kind of battle tested in the playoffs. I think they both have over like 35, 40 career playoff games, which isn't a great sample size, but it's a pretty good one for playoff basketball. And they're both kind of guys who they get thrown around as like fringe MVP candidates when they're more like top 10, 12, 14, whatever players in the league. Now, maybe I'm jumping the gun here. By the way, this is like, I don't know about you, Alex, but like with my friends, like I remember like before I got into media and stuff, this used to be a huge debate, like in like 2020, 2021, just like, drinking beers and like just shooting the shit about basketball. Like me and my buddies used to get into like screaming matches about the Donovan Mitchell, Devin Booker debate. I don't know about you and your friends.
So if you think about it, that's a UK player and
you're right.
a University of Louisville player. So it's definitely a charged debate in Kentucky, depending on who you're talking to. Mm-hmm. And, I think it's a fair discussion. I mean, obviously there's like the lore behind it of like UK versus U of L. And then like, they're similar players in like similar-ish roles, at least more so now than in the past. But, they're scoring guards who are asked to do point guard responsibilities every now and then. Varying opinions on their defense, varying opinions on their playmaking ability, varying opinions on, how much of like 3-level scorers they are, to what extent. So it's just rarely do you get two players that like are so similar that you can kind of look at their skill sets like directly across from each other without having to account for like so much context. We're still taking into account the context of this debate and the respective teams around each of these guys, but also we're not overly burdened by that context to where like you have to ignore so many things because like, oh, it might be different if blank, or it might be different if blank. It's like, no, we can kind of just look at this almost in a vacuum, more so than you can do with some other players. Like a Jokic and Embiid debate is a much more nuanced debate to have because they're very, 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 very different players who play very, very, very different roles, but they're both two top blank centers in the NBA. Like they're 1 and 2, whatever order you have them in, doesn't matter, but they're still different players, and comparing them in a vacuum is hard to do.
I think it matters.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just trying to keep the red dot off my forehead.
I haven't made a joke yet. I got to stop stalling. But I still need to make a joke about the LaMelo Ball, Austin Reeves thing that you went off on a tangent about over the summer. We should do a great debates on that. I'm sure that'd be really fun. But anyways, so okay, when this historically, I'm not saying they're this doesn't give away my answer, first of all. I don't think it should. But you know what this reminds me of in terms of historical debates and their play styles? I think this is a great place to start. But this is basically like the argument of who was better at their peak, Kobe Bryant or Dwayne Wade. Right? Where you have Booker, the master of craft and guile and footwork and poise and patience, tough shot making. And then you have Donovan Mitchell, like this just supreme physical athlete, first step, Euro steps, juke moves, strength. That's kind of like the overarching, obviously like Dwayne Wade, Kobe Bryant were more like top 5 players in the league at their peak, whereas these guys are more like strong all NBA players. So they don't have the same status within the league at their peak, but I think stylistically it's a similar debate. What do you think about that?
Yeah, it's it's tough because, like you said, they are, when you're like putting it into that kind of framework where it's like Kobe Bryant and Dwayne Wade, where they were like top 5 players, like you said, and then Donovan Mitchell and Devin Booker. It's like I did a top 50 the other day for the Shoot Around, the other podcast I do. I did a top 50, and my top 50, Devin Booker and Donovan Mitchell were both like in that 10 to 15 range because the league's just so talented. But yeah, you rarely get 2 players that are like so similarly calibered doing such similar things that like you have an opportunity to look at it and compare almost straight up. That being said, who do you of those 2 players, Dwayne Wade and Kobe Bryant, like where did you fall in that discussion?
So obviously, like, career impact, it's no question. It's Kobe Bryant. I mean, Dwayne Wade's career was shortened by injuries. Kobe Bryant just has so many more All-NBA seasons. It's so tough for me with because, and this is going to get to kind of the crux of this debate we're in today, where it's like that style, like Dwayne Wade's style, like of just like having the first, like this insane, like silver bullet skill, right? It's why everyone loves like Anthony Edwards and so excited about his potentials, because like you can't scheme against a guy like that. Like it's very hard to scheme against like 99.9th all-time percentile physical athleticism, Whereas like and Kobe's that one of the great tough shot makers in NBA history, one of the great playoff scorers in NBA history, but like just that play style, like forget the Kobe Bryant of it. Like think of like DeMar DeRozan or Kevin Durant. Like we've seen like these tough shot makers in the playoffs when you give them an extra shove, a little bit more physicality, better defenders guarding them. You can chip away at their value a little bit. So I don't know, that part of it was always kind of like maybe Wade was better. Like his 2-3 year peak was better than Kobe's, but I think it's super close to me. I don't know. And that like, okay, so what about you?
It's one of those where I'm like, depending on the day that you catch me, I go through like philosophically when looking at basketball, I go through phases where there's certain things I value more. And, like tough shot making, like you said, yeah, that's something you can't really scheme against, but also like, think about the value of like Dwayne Wade's rim pressure, which is something I value an insane amount. Like rim pressure to me is one of the most important things in basketball. Having a primary facilitator or a primary offensive piece that's able to, generate paint touches and collapse defenses and draw help off the corners, et cetera, et cetera. So like sometimes I value what Dwayne Wade was capable of doing more than I value what Kobe was capable of doing, because, both guys I think those guys are more different than like the Donovan Mitchell and Devin Booker debate, even though I think when you're looking at it, especially because Donovan Mitchell like has always kind of been compared to Dwayne Wade, and Devin Booker's always been compared to Kobe Bryant. Even though that's like a fair comparison, just in terms of play style, I definitely think Donovan Mitchell is more of like a rim pressuring kind of Dwayne Wade-esque player offensively. Granted, the pull-up three-point shooting is something that we're going to talk about that I think sets Donovan Mitchell apart. And then Devin Booker is more of like the slow, methodical, mid-range scorer and lower volume three-point shooter. That's not to say Kobe was like low volume three-point shooter relative to his era. But yeah, to answer your question, I don't have enough of a dog in that fight to really like have a strong opinion. It's one of those things where like you're talking about peak. I see the argument for Wade, but career-wise, it's much different because I think Kobe career-wise is definitely on a different level, but different discussion.
Yeah, no, I like that. I think it's kind of good to bring in that historical stuff. It kind of guides us in this analysis. Now, I think what we should do is kind of section this off into little like segments of like specific things. Like, I think we should go defense, passing, playmaking, and then scoring. And then we'll kind of tie this all together. I think we should do the easiest one first, which is, I think, the defense, not because it's an easy answer, but I think because they're guards, there's less facets to it. We're not talking about reaction time and 2-9ing and all the stuff you would talk about with big men, right? It's pretty much just like defensive playmaking and point of attack defense, off-ball defense awareness, stuff like that. Now, before I turn it over to you, where I kind of landed with these two is I think Donovan Mitchell is a better defensive playmaker. And I think the last...
Dang it, you took the words right out of my mouth.
I think the last year and a half with his growth, I think Devin Booker is a better point of attack on-ball defender.
I mean, you pretty much said exactly what I was going to say. I'm kind of mad at you. I was going to say Donovan Mitchell's a better event creator, which is, that's defensive playmaking. I think Devin Booker is lower risk, but like more of a medium to like above medium reward, whereas Donovan Mitchell can sometimes be high risk, high reward defensively. I think Donovan Mitchell probably gambles a little bit more, whereas you kind of know what you're getting with Devin Booker. Where and that's not like a slight on. Sometimes saying like, you know what you're getting with this player implies level of mediocrity, and I don't think that's fair to Devin Booker. I think he is definitely not a mediocre defender, especially lately. The Suns are like one of the best defensive teams in the NBA as of late.
Hat tip Frank Vogel.
Yeah, which that's what they got him for, I imagine, especially with all the offensive firepower on that team. And he's done a great job. With Devin Booker, it's like, okay, he's going to be able to hold his own. Is he going to be like a Drew Holiday, just completely clamping up guys and forcing turnovers when guys are trying to go off the dribble? Like, no, not necessarily. It's probably not going to happen. He may reach that point where he's like late in a game in the fourth quarter where he just locks in and completely clamps somebody up. Yeah, that absolutely could happen. But I also think you can kind of say the same for Donovan Mitchell. Both these guys are capable of scaling up their defense during the biggest moments. But Devin Booker, I think, has a lesser level of risk, which as a result, I mean, you don't hit big if you don't try to hit. You know, you gotta go for it sometimes. And can that be a detriment to a defense? I couldn't say. On either side of the coin, is it better to be the lower risk, maybe lower reward guy, or is it better to be the higher risk, higher reward guy? Do you have an opinion on that? Like,
yeah, so that's kind of where I wanted to take this discussion. Really quickly, I feel like this is just like a small thing that I've noticed about Mitchell's on-ball. So D Wade, back in his day, he was both. He was great point of attack defender, great defensive playmaker, right? It's kind of funny, like, we've talked about like the fake motor guys.
Yeah.
The guys who like, they slap the floor, they get in their stance, and then they just get like blown by. Mitchell is like the poster child of this movement, I feel like, as an on-ball defender. And you know what it reminds me of Kobe. Kobe used to do that all the time. He used to like get in this like theatrical defensive stance, and he was really stiff, and he would get blown by. So I just wanted to say that, a little micro thing about Mitchell. But so I guess that's kind of like the answer to this question is the answer to this. So the answer to the question of who the better defender is between the two is the answer to this question. When it comes to your offensive star, right? So when we're talking about team building, your offensive star, your number one or number two, that's another thing we're going to talk about in a second, but you're probably not, in the ideal world, asking them to be one of your better defenders, your best defenders. Maybe they're your fourth best defender on the floor. Ideally, they're your fifth best defender on the floor. From that guy, what is more valuable? Solid on-ball defense or defensive playmaking?
Cop-out answer would be depends on your scheme, which is, I think this is one of the areas where you have to look contextually at both of these guys, because I think with the Cavs, you're much more willing to allow Donovan Mitchell to focus on defensive playmaking because of who's surrounding him. That's a very, very, very good defensive team. You have Isaac Okoro, you have Evan Mobley, you have Jarrett Allen, you have Max Strus. You have these guys that can brunt the burden defensively in areas where it maybe matters a little bit more. I think off-ball defense is generally oftentimes a little bit more important than on-ball defense because you're gonna get put in rotation. I tweeted about this earlier. You're gonna get put in rotation. The best offenses against the best defenses, the offenses are going to put the defense in rotation. That's just how basketball works. It doesn't matter how good of on-ball defense you have because basketball is a game of advantage creation. Those advantages get created no matter what. Drew Holiday, considered one of the best point of attack defenders in the NBA, even when he was with Milwaukee and in Defensive Player of the Year conversations, even in New Orleans when he was in Defensive Player of the Year conversations, even a guy like that is still going to be behind the ball, funneling the team into drop coverage, and then it's up to your off-ball defense at that point. Weak side help, who's going to be helping off the corners, stuff like that. Who's going to be making the rotations after you get put in rotation, and how good are those guys at making those rotations, and how good are their instincts? So Donovan Mitchell, all of that is to say, you're fine with Donovan Mitchell's defensive event creation. You live with it because you're a good defensive team. Now, Devin Booker, pivoting over to the Sun side of things, it's a much different conversation because they have been a good defensive team. I think Yusuf Nurkic has been a good interior defender in rim presence, but he's not a Jarrett Allen. That team doesn't have an Evan Mobley. And so I think they're playing more of a all hands on deck, almost egalitarian defensive approach, whereas Cleveland is like, okay, Mitchell, you're going to be our star defensively, not saying he's their best defender by any means. It's not what I'm saying at all. But they're okay with him just trying to create live ball turnovers, allow them to get out and run in transition. That's not how the Suns are approaching things. All of that is to say, could Devin Booker maybe be doing the things that Donovan Mitchell is doing defensively? That's where I don't know. It's like, would Devin Booker be doing the same defensive event creation if he was in Cleveland? And then on the other side of the coin, could Donovan Mitchell be operating in the same role that Devin Booker is in with the same level of success?
Now, I think the answer is no to the Devin Booker one, just because I think part of Mitchell's event creation is the insane wingspan and then the reaction time and the athleticism. Now with the Mitchell on-ball defense, I also don't think he could do it. I don't think he has like the body, the side-to-side rear view kind of movement to really be a good point of attack defender. And that's why he gets into those theatrical stances that look super stiff and he keeps getting blown by, right? Now, I'll say this though. So what in this role we're talking about here, I'm not talking about your best perimeter defenders, right? I'm talking about a guy who's probably going to be your second worst, your worst perimeter defender. What Booker's doing right now with his sturdy on-ball defense is raising the floor of this Phoenix Suns defense, right? It's Booker on most nights when they're healthy. Booker, Allen, Beal, Durant, Nurkic, right? Durant's been doing a great job of handling like the bigger forwards. Nurkic gets the center or the non-shooter, whatever kind of thing they're running. And then it's like Booker, because he's stronger than Allen, because he's a little bit longer than Allen, he's going to guard the primary ball handler, okay? And he's like become like a pretty good on-ball defender, especially for his player archetype. And it helps the Suns go from being what on paper should be a bad defense to like an average defense, a good defense in the half court when they can get their guys set, get all their ducks in a row. But when we're talking about winning an NBA championship, right, you don't want floor raising. You want ceiling raising. And so the idea is when we're building a team, you want your defense to, like this Suns team is not optimally built. And we're talking about teams that are optimally built, right? And you want a team with strong defensive infrastructure. And so say like both of them are playing with strong defensive infrastructure and they're the fourth, fifth guy on defense, right? They're the fourth, fifth best guy on defense in their five-man lineup. I think Mitchell's chaos with the boom bust nature of it is more valuable. And as we talk about this now, that's why I'm leaning towards Mitchell being the better defender between the two.
I think I would probably tend to agree. Generating live ball turnovers is like one of the most valuable things you can do as like a guard defender. It's one of the reasons that Drew Holiday is as good as he is for a multitude of other reasons, but that's one thing that he historically has done very, very well. Marcus Smart is somebody who does a great job of generating turnovers. And, when I'm talking about like live ball turnovers, when you poke a ball away and get a steal, your team's getting out and running in transition. It's pretty rare that you're going to see a team get a steal and they're like, let's slow down the offense and get set up. Unless it's in like a late game situation or like it's the Dallas Mavericks. They're not going to get a steal and then they're just going to kind of just stand there and let the defense move back and get set. It's like, no, you get a steal, you're getting out and running. So I think I would probably tend to agree that the possible outcomes defensively that you get with Donovan Mitchell are more valuable than the outcomes that you're getting from Devin Booker. And that's not to say that Devin Booker is a bad defender. All of that is to say I just think I value what Donovan Mitchell is doing more.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Okay, so I think we can put a pin in that. We'll say for now, Mitchell's the better defender. I don't think there's any reason to talk about it in a playoff context
right
for now. Let's go over to passing. Okay, I know it's hard to separate passing and scoring, but let's try to go passing, talk about playmaking a little bit. So there's one pass that, to me, I really focused on, like type of pass. We're talking about, because real quick for the audience, the people who haven't like really thought about passing as much as Alex and I, there's like, not every pass is created equal, right? If I'm standing there and I'm on the top of the key, the top of the arc, right? And I see Alex on the right slot and he's like, he's got like a foot of space, right, before him as defender, and I make that pass to him, that's not like a super valuable pass. I mean, it's just like most professional athletes can make that pass. It's got a VORP of 0, right? Value over replacement.
Right.
But if I were to get the ball, drive past my man, okay, collapse Alex's defender on me, and then kick it out to Alex, that's got a lot of value, right? So, but if I was
I see where you're going with this, because it's literally the same exact thing I was
And so the toughest pass in today's NBA to make, the most valuable pass, the best passers can all make it, is a skip pass. And what happens with a skip pass is you're on one side of the court, right? The defense is shading towards that side of the court. And then on the weak side of the court, without the basketball, there's usually an open player. And the defense does this because it is very difficult to make that pass, both from making it an accurate pass, throwing the ball fast enough that the defense can't close out to it, seeing the pass, right? And last postseason, one thing the Denver Nuggets did was they would it's called at the level coverage, right? They would have their big man come up to the level of the screen, and it looked like they were double teaming the ball handler. And they would do this to Kevin Durant, Devin Booker. They didn't do it to Chris Paul. They were using different coverage on him for different reasons we're not going to talk about beyond the scope of this episode. But and they were daring Durant and Booker to make that corner skip pass. Durant was not hitting that skip pass. I think part of it is he's not really good at throwing one-handed passes, which is kind of what you need to do with the skip pass to throw it properly. Mm-hmm. Booker, as the series went on, got better. And so when we got into this season, right, when I scouted Booker, I scouted him a lot in January. I was looking to see how much improvement he'd had with that skip pass. And I think he does hit it, and he's the best skip passer on the Suns roster right now. But he still misses it pretty frequently compared to the other offensive number ones in the NBA. Whereas turning it over to Donovan Mitchell, I don't know if you've ever seen Donovan Mitchell throw a skip pass, but talk about like needing one hand. So this guy's got these like I don't even know what I would describe his arm as, but it's this thing, okay? It's this thing that's unlike anything in human history, right? And he'll like wrap the ball around his arm and then he will chuck it like a curveball. The ball will curve, quite literally curve, and it's a 99 mile per hour curveball, okay? Which is, for baseball people, that's not real, okay? He'll throw a 99 per hour curveball right into the shooter's pocket on the skip pass. And so that's kind of where I start with this, where it's like, Mitchell is clearly better at seeing and then delivering that skip pass. And I don't know, what else about Booker's passing arsenal can he bring that would usurp that?
This is where I don't want to dive too much into the scoring. We're talking about just passing right now. So we're removing the playmaking aspect from it, because playmaking and passing are very tightly intertwined, but playmaking takes in how you're leveraging the scoring into creating for others. And with Devin Booker, I'm with you. A lot of his, I don't want to say a lot necessarily, but his passing opportunities in the windows that I think he's able to not just see, but capitalize on. I think his overall arsenal as a passer is limited. Part of that is due to some of the scoring aspects that we'll get into. Being a downhill scoring threat is going to create a lot of passing windows and opportunities just by nature of advantage creation. And with Donovan Mitchell, I think some of those naturally occur more often. But yeah, it's also capitalizing on them. I think the points in Donovan Mitchell's, let's say he's driving to the basket, I think the points at which he can make those passes during the 2-3 dribbles that he's using to get downhill towards the rim, the points at which he can make those passes during that process is more diverse than the points at which Devin Booker is able to make those passes. And these steps, like if you think about you're making a pass, you're dribbling, and at one point the ball reaches its apex on the up dribble and you don't have to like dribble it again to get it to where you want it. You can just get the ball and make the pass without having to get it into exactly the right spot where you want it. You don't have to pick it up with two hands and then throw it with one hand. You can just get it with one hand and make the pass. I think more often you're going to see Donovan Mitchell just naturally getting the ball on its way up and making that pass more often than you'll see Devin Booker making that kind of pass. Devin Booker, I think, whatever the case, whatever the reason behind why, that's besides the point, you just won't see him make that pass as often. He has to be in a more comfortable position to make those kinds of passes, which, if you think about it, is more, you can game plan for that a little bit more, knowing that like, okay, in these certain contexts, we know we have time because this guy's not going to be able to make this pass until like half a second or a full second after he picks the ball up. You know, Donovan Mitchell's a lot more unpredictable. You can't game plan for that as much. So I think I would probably lean passing wise, not necessarily playmaking. We're going to get to that, but passing wise, I would lean towards Donovan Mitchell.
Yeah, I think what you're getting at here is it's the hand size, it's that, again, the wingspan of Mitchell to kind of be able to cup that, because you need to be able to control that basketball, like to go from a live dribble and flow into that. Again, this is an extremely hard pass to make. That's why defenses are so comfortable with like playing this way, right? Where it's like you're live dribble, you're going downhill, you're worried about on the other side maybe somebody coming to dig in and take the ball away from you. You have a big man in front of you, you have another defender on your back. Like it's a lot going on the mind. And Mitchell's ability to, again, have better control of the basketball because he has bigger hands. And then in case things go wrong where he loses some of that control, wrap it around his arm like he's like I'm not even going to try to find an analogy. Like I said, he's something that we've never seen before, and he'll wrap it around his arm and then make that throw. It just gives him more, like you said, more times within the possession. What is the word you used? The phrase?
Like steps, like points at which he could make. I forget.
Yeah, exactly.
Wording I used, but yeah,
exactly. It was beautiful. Whatever you said, it was a beautiful point. And that's kind of why I agree with you. Where I would say Mitchell's probably the better passer. One question I have for you, though, just because I know in the Mavericks series in 2022 that the Mavericks, one of their keys to success later on in the series against the Suns was they started blitzing Booker a lot. And I think that they had success with that, partially because of Booker's inability at the time to handle the double team, but also I think just they didn't have really like the guys to play 4-on-3 with, like Cam Johnson, Mikal Bridges, Jay Crowder, not really going to make you pay for leaving them 4-on-3 at the time. Who do you think is better at handling double teams?
That's a really interesting question because, again, a cop-out answer is it depends on the situation and like who's the roll man. Because if you're blitzing like a ball screen, chances are whoever set the screen is going to roll or they're going to pop. So there's the context of that you have to think about. But let's look at the Cavs, for example, where Jarrett Allen's usually going to be the one setting the ball screen. Let's just go with that just to kind of paint a picture. The defense blitzes the ball screen. Jarrett Allen's rolling. Donovan Mitchell, I think, is probably a little quicker to make the pass, but it's not always necessarily like it's not always going to be the best pass. But I also don't think Donovan Mitchell is limited to just hitting the roll man. Like sometimes you'll see teams, once they see that short roll pass is open, they're going to send someone, they're going to immediately rotate onto that. And then someone on the wing will be left open. And that's an area where I feel like they're probably pretty comparable, Devin Booker and Donovan Mitchell, in like their ability to see the floor and find like the open man on the wing instead of just like being laser focused on hitting the guy on the short roll. But what do you think about that? Do you see either one of them being kind of having the advantage there?
Yeah, so I think my thing is one thing I look at, and the reason I'm bringing this up is because I think Booker's improved at this over the years.
Agree.
And one thing I look at is when you get double teamed, the worst thing you could do is pick up that dribble because you basically allowed the defense to slow you down and then also rotate back. Because once you pick up the dribble, the second defender will usually rotate back to wherever they have to rotate, whatever the rotation calls for, right? And it's like they got to double team you without sacrificing an advantage, without sacrificing a power play, right? It's something I've talked about with Tyrese Maxey and why I'm a little bit lower on him as a primary kind of perimeter player. I don't know why I had to bring him into this. I couldn't help it.
Sorry,
but
man.
With that said, I kind of like. So again, like you said, Mitchell can make like more high level passes out of the double team, but I kind of like Booker's ability to maintain the live dribble against the double team. Because the longer you maintain that live dribble, the longer the defense has to keep the double team on you, and that gives you more time to kind of survey the landscape of the court and find the opening.
Yeah, and part of that too is like, do you have teammates that are going to move to give you an opening to pass through? That's not always on the guy who's getting doubled. It certainly some guys are just so good that it doesn't matter if you're showing for them. But if no one's getting open to give you a pass, then that's not really on you. That's on your team at that point. Just bear that in mind. I'm not going to say like for one team or the other who does a better job at getting open whenever Devin Booker or Donovan Mitchell gets trapped. Like that's something I'm not that much of a sicko that I'm going to like sit there and like look for that specifically. But something
if I had to guess though, I feel like, I don't know, man. I feel like Nurkic is such a good short roll passer that the Suns probably have better like post double team offense is my guess.
I think you're probably, I would probably agree with that. I was thinking about it in my head and like, just
they have a lot of ball movers.
Yeah, a lot of ball movers. It's a good
Grayson Allen, man, that guy could he can attack an advantage.
Oh yeah,
he's a great advantage attacker. But so yeah, I think that little wrinkle though doesn't change either of our opinions. So we're already kind of defense, passing, Mitchell right now. But the main for this archetype, right? I feel like the biggest thing is like the scoring and how that because here's the thing, like Michael Jordan is, let me think of a good example for this one. Let's go with Michael Jordan against, I can't think of a good example off the top of my head.
I'm trying to figure out where you're going with this.
No, I'm trying to think of a guy who, because Michael Jordan, so I was going to go like Larry Bird, right? Larry Bird's better pure passer than Michael Jordan.
Yeah.
Like Mitchell is Booker. But I was trying to find somebody who's better pure passer and better defender than Michael Jordan. But Michael Jordan is still better than them, obviously, because here's the thing about passing, right? Even if you're not like a perfect passer, if you just create so many advantages, it's okay. You have more passes you can miss. It's cool. And like a guy like Michael Jordan was such a great scorer, and just such a problem for defenses. It was like, it's okay if he misses some passes. It's okay if he's not Larry Bird or Magic Johnson as a passer, because he's creating, like, I'm just going to throw a number, right? Say Magic and Bird create like 12 open shots per 100 or something. Jordan's creating like 18, 19 or whatever. And it's okay if Jordan's only hitting on 60% of those open passes he's creating, even if Bird and Magic are hitting on 75% of them, right? Because he's still hitting more open guys per 100. I can't find a good analogy for it. But so I guess my point in saying is, like, just because I think me and you both are in agreement that Mitchell is a better passer and defender, it doesn't automatically mean Booker is the better. I mean, Mitchell's the better player overall. With that said, how do you feel about these two as scorers?
So I'll tie in a little bit of the playmaking discussion here too. Again, just to give, like, I'm not going to use this entirely as my reasoning, but to give the cop-out answer, it depends on what you value. Because scoring arsenal-wise, these guys are very different. For some context, Donovan Mitchell is attempting 5.2 shots at the rim per game. Devin Booker's only attempting 3.1 shots at the rim per game. From the mid-range, Devin Booker's attempting 10.5 mid-range shots a game. Donovan Mitchell's only attempting 6.2. From three, Donovan Mitchell's attempting 8.9 threes a game. Devin Booker's only attempting 5.7. So you can see from a like scoring diet perspective, these guys are different, very, very different. But if you look at the efficiency wise, they're pretty similar. Devin Booker, 66% at the rim. Donovan Mitchell, 64% at the rim. Mid-range, Devin Booker, 50% at the rim. Donovan Mitchell, 47%. From three, Devin Booker, 38%. Donovan Mitchell, 37%. So these guys are pretty similar efficiency-wise. I think true shooting percentage, it's a 1% difference. 62 Booker, 61 Donovan Mitchell. And I'm rounding accordingly based on what the decimal is. But
thank you for explaining that.
Right, yeah, because I don't have the significant figures set on Excel right now. I have a whole spreadsheet over on my left. But my point with all of that is not necessarily like there's not a ton of stock you can put into just like the raw efficiencies to be like, oh, this guy's a better scorer because he's more efficient from the rim. He's more efficient in the mid-range and more efficient from three, because that's not really the point. That's one of those things where like stats do not tell the whole story. I guess the attempt numbers kind of do tell more of a story when you factor that in. This is where I'm going to get into a philosophical discussion about me and how I view basketball. Mm-hmm. I value rim pressure and, 3-point scoring threat more than I value mid-range scoring ability. Being able to do all three, even better. That's great. I think Devin Booker can do all three. And Donovan Mitchell can do all three. I don't necessarily always want him doing all three. I think he has gotten better at abusing drop coverage in the mid-range and being able to just like actually leverage that as part of his scoring arsenal. But just from like not to get like too into the numbers here, but like from a points per shot perspective, both of these guys, even though Devin Booker's shooting 50% from mid-range, from a points per shot perspective, a shot at the rim for him and a shot from three is still more valuable. And the same goes for Donovan Mitchell. That's just how the math works. Like, that's not a like ethereal thing or like some nebulous thing that doesn't really like matter. It's like, no, that's just a fact. You know, a shot at the rim and a shot from three at their levels of efficiency as scorers is inherently more valuable than a mid-range shot. The mid-range stuff factoring in just kind of changes the coverages that defenses can throw at you. I personally value what Donovan Mitchell brings to the table as a scorer a little bit more, because that is how if I were a coach, that is what I would want out of my primary facilitator. Is you're going to put pressure on the rim, and teams have to either switch ball screens because they know you can pull up from three off of a screen, or they're going to blitz you, or they're going to hedge. You know, that's stuff that's going to create playmaking opportunities. So all of that is to say I value a little bit more what Donovan Mitchell does. But in a vacuum, Devin Booker is the more efficient scorer. And that's not to say that Devin Booker doesn't also have areas in which he creates advantages and like draws double teams. Like, Devin Booker's going to post up a lot more. He's a very strong post scoring guard. That's going to draw double teams just as much as, well, maybe not necessarily just as much. I'm not saying it doesn't draw just as much. I'm just saying I don't have the numbers for that. Devin Booker's still going to draw double teams when he's in the post, just like Donovan Mitchell is going to draw double teams coming off of screens or in the pick and roll when teams blitz him or hedge or et cetera, et cetera. When that happens, Devin Booker is going to have opportunities where he can find a guy depending on where his teammates are at on the floor, just like Donovan Mitchell is going to be able to drive and kick after drawing strong side help or weak side help, et cetera, et cetera. I think it is easier to create those opportunities when you are a high volume 3-point shooter and a high volume rim pressurer. Paint touches, these guys are about the same, but I kind of give the edge to Donovan Mitchell in terms of applying pressure on the rim just because his attempt frequency is so much higher. You know, the efficiency difference is like 2 percentage points, so it's not significant enough that I'm like, oh, well, Devin Booker's more efficient, so then, you know, he's putting more pressure on the rim. It's like teams don't want to give up a 64% score at the rim like Donovan Mitchell. It's like, okay, yeah, it's 64% versus 66%. It's like, well, okay, he's still getting to the rim he's shooting at the rim 5.2 times a game. It's like, you don't want to just give that up. That's a dumb thing to do. But I don't know. What's your thoughts on that between the two?
So everything you say is so interesting because from like a philosophical, in a vacuum perspective, right? We talked about it with Wade and Bryant. I prefer that the rim pressure, the athleticism, the physicality, especially in the playoffs, like that does wonders. And in the 2020 playoffs and the 2021 playoffs, Donovan Mitchell was one of the best playoff risers in the league. I think part of it was because, you know, he was just sizzling hot from three, but also because of the rim pressure and what that does. But the thing is, though, it's funny we talk about that, the math, all this, like, oh, like what Mitchell does is more efficient than what Booker does. And yet Booker has the advantage in true shooting. I know that's an individual stat, right? And I think it gets to one of the reasons why, like, the great mid-range scorers, right, are able to be efficient despite taking a shot that mathematically is not efficient. It's because they can leverage that mid-range shot into free throw opportunities. I think Booker's at, 10 free throws per 100 this season? I don't know if I have that
something
number.
like that.
I think they're both pretty similar there. Okay, Booker's at, is this Booker or Mitchell? I don't even know which one I'm at. And Mitchell's at 8.4 free throws per 100. And I think Booker's almost at 10. Last time I checked, he was.
He is
9.5.
at 9.5.
Yeah, so it's interesting because, like, you would think the guy who's constantly getting downhill would have the higher free throw rate, but it's Booker who has the higher free throw rate. So it's like, I agree with you. I like I like Mitchell's downhill rim pressure and all that. But there's like something going on here. And if I had to guess what that something is, I think it's Phoenix having better spacing on the floor more times than not than Cleveland. I heard JJ Redick talking about this with Jamal Mashburn on his podcast, but it's easier to get away with fouls when you're playing a team with bad spacing because everybody's kind of cluttered together, right? You could do a little shove.
If you're an official, you can't see as much.
Yeah, you can't see it. Whereas if everything's spread out, the Suns usually have at least 4 shooters on the court, right? At least 4 shooters. Sometimes they have 5 when they go 5 out with Durant at the 5 and Eric Gordon. And so everything's spaced out, and Booker's kind of able to grift these. He's also incredible at drawing mid-range fouls. You know, he's in the Jason Tatum, DeMar DeRozan, Michael Jordan, Clay Bryant school of drawing fouls from the mid-range. Mm-hmm. But I think that plays a role, right, in this disparity we're seeing here in the free throw percentage and then in the true shooting percentage because it's harder to be efficient when there's so much clutter. Like, yes, Cleveland's had injuries this year, but there is still a lot of minutes Mitchell has played with Evan Mobley and Jared Allen on the floor. And no matter how many threes Mobley hits this year, he's not going to do enough to change the way people defend him this year. I don't know what's going to happen in the future,
right?
But this season. And so I think that when we're talking about this, right, it's like, how does this scoring and this playmaking, what does it do for your team offense, your global offense, right? And so I'm looking at their offensive ratings when they're on the floor this season per cleaning the glass. And Donovan Mitchell, Devin Booker, when he's on the floor, the Suns offense is in the 93rd percentile. Mitchell, that offense is in the 69th percentile. Okay, and my guess here is because the Cleveland Cavaliers play more defensive personnel when Mitchell is on the floor than when Booker's on the floor for the Suns, right? Now, when you look at the on-off offensive rating, so how does the offensive rating change when you're on the court and off the court, right? So what's your footprint on the offense? Devin Booker's in the 96th percentile, Donovan Mitchell's in the 86th percentile, and you're like, okay, well, so Devin Booker has more of an impact. But you have to look at the context like we've talked about, where we talked about on this Suns team. This Suns team is devoid of ball handling. They have a lot of scoring, a lot of shot making, but they don't have a lot of ball handling. And we talked about Booker being the only guy with the skip pass in his bag, right? So like when he's off the court, they lose that. They lose the ability to make those high value passes. With Mitchell, when he's off the court, Darius Garland's usually on the court, right? Or this is going to sound silly, but Craig Porter Jr., a guy who can make skip passes.
Right.
Craig Porter Jr. is probably a better passer than almost any guy on the Suns right now. That's kind of crazy to think about, but it's true. Karis LeVert, another really good passer, right? Those guys are backing him up. And so...
Yeah, so your offense isn't going to crater out as much the second you go off the floor.
And so what I'm seeing here, and I think this goes with what you're saying, I just want to put more color on some of the stuff we're talking about here, is we're talking about building a championship team, right? And Donovan Mitchell can, with his style, give you like a solid offense with really strong defensive infrastructure. He can buoy your offense, right, with really strong defensive infrastructure, whereas Booker gives you like this elite offense, but your defense is like, it's not playoff level. You know, I think once they get in the playoffs, it's going to be really tricky for them to handle a lot of teams. And I guess, so I'm going back to all this, and where I am about to turn it over to you, but where I lean here is, I don't know if either one of them is good enough to be an offensive number one on a championship team. I'm not sure yet. But if I had to pick, I'd say Mitchell is a better offensive number one, and Booker's a better offensive number two. Like, I like Booker flanking another offensive star.
I had not thought about that, but that makes total sense.
And real quickly before I turn it over to you, I think the big reason here is I think the offensive number one stuff is pretty easy. Mitchell's the rim pressure we talked about, the passing, that on-ball stuff, the floor raising he does for this team with all the defensive infrastructure. I think it makes him better suited to kind of lead the ship, and then you put pieces around him that fit good. You put like wings that can ball handle and stuff and shoot threes. Whereas with Booker, because he's not a rim pressure guy, because he has some limitations in his vision, you want a guy who can, as the primary, the number one guy who can remedy that stuff, right? But at the same time, because Booker, to me, is a better shooter, pure shooter off the catch, right? He's a better spacer, quicker trigger. And then also, another underrated part of this is Booker's a little bit bigger than Mitchell, okay? So you can, and usually primary creators, they come in smaller sizes, right? So you have a better chance of lasting on defense, as we saw with those Suns teams who were able to, despite not having, like, have good spacing and good defense while playing Paul and Booker, whereas the Cavs had to sacrifice their spacing to have good defense with two small guards, if I'm making sense here. But that's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, I think that's probably like the best way to put it. I mean, I don't know if it's fair. It goes back to the cop out of like, what do you value more? And I think, like you said, it's easier to build. It's not easier. It's a clearer path to what you have to surround a player like Donovan Mitchell with, rather than what you have to surround a player like Devin Booker with, because the play style of drive and kick and generate rim pressure and be able to score from the perimeter off the dribble, like, that skill set is inherently going to be an easier type of player to build around. It's like, okay, we need shooters, like we need guys who can attack closeouts, and we need someone who can like roll to the rim. Like you see Donovan Mitchell just doing a ton of handling as the pick and roll ball handler this year. It's like, yeah, you just need a guy who's going to be able to attack off a screen and then kick it out. That's like the oldest trick in the book, basically. So I really, really like the idea of, yeah, Devin Booker is the better number 2 and Donovan Mitchell is the better number 1. Or maybe better isn't the exact right word, but you know, just for lack of a better word. And I think we're kind of seeing that right now. It's like the Cavs, not to say Darius Garland's bad. I think he's been much better recently. You know, with Donovan Mitchell, it's like we're kind of seeing that he's at his best when he's the guy, and the Cavs benefit from that immensely. Devin Booker, he's the number 1 right now, pretty much. I mean, I think Kevin Durant and him, points per game wise, they're pretty similar this year right now, right?
Yeah, but Durant's doing a lot of play finishing, kind of.
Yeah, it coming more with just like within the flow of the offense. And now that Bradley Beal's back, I think things are kind of funky now with like the hierarchy of who's facilitating most of the offense and blah, blah, blah. Kind of a different discussion.
Beal's another contender of the fake motor guy. Incredibly fake motor. You got to watch this guy in a defensive stance. You would think if you just took a picture of him in a defensive stance, you'd think he's Gary Payton. And then you watch the next like 3 seconds and it's like he's watching with us as the guy drives past him. But anyways, continue.
Yeah, but I think you just said it. You really said it best. It's Devin Booker. You will see, and you are seeing at times, the limitations of everything that he can do as your number 1. I think you need, and that's why the Chris Paul teams were so successful. Not because Chris Paul was the number 1. Devin Booker was the number 1 for that team, scoring wise. But when we say number 1, we're not saying number 1 like who's taking the most shots, who's scoring the most points. We're talking number 1 as in like offensive engine, like who is setting the table for everything, who is developing the possession, who is creating the advantages, who is leveraging their threat the most to get the offensive wheels greased. And that's where I think the difference lies. Now, the last thing I'll really say is it's obviously very team dependent on which one you want more.
Now, this is the big question here. I'm sorry to cut you off, but this will answer everything
you're fine.
for us. Because I think we both agree that a number 1 that you can't build a championship level team around is worse than a number 2 that you, because I mean, it's, you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? That number 2 that you can build. So my question for you, and this will kind of answer everything for us really, is do you think that this version of Donovan Mitchell is good enough to be a championship number 1 on offense?
I think and we're not talking past versions, we're talking this version, what we've seen from him this year. I think this version of Donovan Mitchell, yes. I think this is a player that, surrounded with the right team, and that's not saying like you give him a super team. I'm just saying surrounded with the right pieces conducive to his success, just on like a normal scale. I think, yes, Donovan Mitchell is good enough to be the number one.
I agree with you, and it's because, let's take this Cavs team, for example, right? If they found a way, I think it's very workable, right? If the Brooklyn Nets were interested, it's very workable to get a deal between Garland and Mikal Bridges, right? And if they had, say you swap Mikal Bridges for Darius Garland right now, and nothing else like significantly changes, maybe like some fringe rotation players, are the Cleveland Cavaliers an NBA title contender this year?
Yeah, for sure. I think they're like probably about as close as you can get to being not a top tier contender, but they're in that like they're probably a contender this year. But you throw Mikal Bridges on that team instead of Darius Garland, and that's not calling Darius Garland a bad player. Let's clarify that. Darius Garland is not a bad player. I think we've kind of seen the fit is clunky, and it's going to continue to be clunky. Could they make it work? Maybe, but like it just is what it is. But yeah, you throw Mikal Bridges on there instead of Darius Garland. I think that's a setup much more conducive to success. And you don't, if anything, the defense gets better. It does get better. It's not.
It does. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Even though I think Bridges' defense is a little bit overstated.
Yeah, a little bit, especially now that he's overextended as a first option, and he shouldn't be a first option.
That guy's not a first option.
Right.
So if and the thing is, like, Mitchell would still be the number one in that alignment. You know, he's still clearly the number. We're bringing in another top 50, 60 player, and it doesn't change where Mitchell stands in the offensive hierarchy. And so I think if we both agree with that, then I think that answers our question for this debate.
I think it does too.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest. One thing I want to say for those listening, I went into this. I don't even want to say like I didn't have an opinion. I went into this thinking I was going to come away with the conclusion that Devin Booker was, quote unquote better. I kind of was like, yeah. I was like, it's mainly because I hadn't dove into it enough, but I guess it was a preconceived notion. I was like, yeah, Devin, it's going to end up being Devin Booker. And then as I dug through it and I was like, dang, I just value what Donovan Mitchell does just so much more. And I think it's from a team building perspective, which is kind of the big caveat here that makes me lean so much towards Mitchell. It's just like, it's so much simpler with a guy like Mitchell than it is a guy like Booker. I think we've seen that over the years.
Yeah. No, I mean, how much of this changes like our perception of these two players if Terrence Mann never goes like electric in the I'm being serious, in the Western Conference semifinals in 2021, 2022, whatever it was. It was 2021. Yeah, 2021. But like what? Yeah. Like if we get to see those two in a playoff series, because I think that Utah Jazz team was better than the Phoenix Suns team.
I think so too. And I think that team wasn't as equipped to punish the lack of perimeter scoring ability.
They didn't have a 5-out pitch.
Perimeter defense, rather. Excuse me. Wow. Yeah. That's a tough one. That's one of those what ifs. Like we've gotten the Donovan Mitchell and Jamal Murray matchup, which has been electric. But we haven't gotten the Donovan Mitchell, Devin Booker matchup, which I think would be similarly, like, again, UK versus U of L, bringing it full circle.
We would take both of these guys over Jamal Murray, right?
Yeah. Well.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. That's good.
I think, yes, I agree. The different discussion I think that's more interesting is, does Devin Booker work as well with Jokic as Jamal Murray does?
Yeah, he does. Dude, him in a DHO game like that. Devin Booker's, dude, you know what I just thought about? Well, I guess he plays with Nurkic. Never mind. I take that back. I was going to say, he's never really played with like a delay big man.
That's what I was thinking. It's like, it's tough to say because obviously we've seen Jamal Murray with Jokic for so long that we're just accustomed to like, yeah, he's a monster off of DHOs. And then with Devin Booker, it's like, well, we don't, yes, Nurkic can do that, but we haven't seen him really in a DHO system like that. So it's a tough comparison, just like who would work better. Like, yeah, we've seen Jamal Murray do it. And then you have to look like hypothetically at Devin Booker. It's like, it's not as easy. So, yeah. Anything else to say about this discussion? This was really fun to do.
Mm-hmm. No, I'm already like brainstorming like other ones I want to do. I guess that's like a good kind of way to close this out is we should, if you're the audience, please comment what other debates would you like to see us do on this here podcast. Obviously, we're getting close to playoffs, so try to maybe fit in one more before then, but definitely in the off season, man, when me and him are just spitballing, trying to figure out what to talk about. That'd be a lot. This was a ton of fun. Like, I don't know, such like nuance and get to make historical references. Just such a good time podcast.
This is probably my favorite podcast we've ever done. Like, this was a blast. I hope if you're listening, I hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. Cause yeah, this was like the epitome of just like talking ball to me. It was a good time. So yeah, if you enjoyed it, be sure to leave a 5-star rating. We really appreciate it. Subscribe, leave a like, all that fun stuff. Check us out on Twitter at AlexHoops_, at Mat Issa 15, MATISSA 15. Thank you all so much for listening, and we'll see you in the next one.